Hello, and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. I feel so privileged you are taking time out of your busy life to learn all about the ways to interpret neurodivergence for you and your child. Remember, all advice on this podcast is general and may not specifically apply to your child, so we encourage you to also talk to your GP, paediatrician or specialist to see if what you've learned will help your family. Hello and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. As can happen in the world of podcasting, we've had a delay for our final definition episode, What Are Learning Disorders? So we'll be bringing that to you in Season 2. For the final episode of Season 1, I wanted to bring you a topic that parents and carers of all neurodivergent children can identify, and that is sensory sensitivities. The world of sensory processing can be overwhelming for our children, so it felt vital to break down what it is, what it means, and how we can help. To help us do that, I got to chat to Stephanie Van Velzen of Uplift Therapy Ballarat. Steph is the practice director of Uplift Therapy, a paediatric allied health service in Ballarat that specialises in supporting neurodivergent children and their families through their journey from early childhood through adolescence. Steph has over 14 years' experience as an occupational therapist and is passionate about supporting the whole family throughout the therapeutic process. She prioritises relationship and connection within the support she provides. Steph gets the most joy out of seeing children get that precious glimmer in their eyes when they feel loved and connected with their peers and the adults around them within their interactions and their play. Steph is a certified DIR floor time therapist and co-op therapist and uses these approaches to support children to deepen their play and interactions and to develop their daily functional skills. We feel very blessed to have her as the OT for Mr. 8, so you'll find a lot of stories coming to this conversation, and I'm very excited to bring to you our discussion on sensory processing. Hello, Steph. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So excited to be chatting with you, Carly.
And the privilege of us being in person, which is a rarity, so it's really nice to have us both on camera in the same spot. So talking about sensory processing today, a big topic, I think, for all neurodivergences across the spectrum, as we call it. I think it's always the best place to start is with a lovely definition. How do you feel about doing a definition?
Oh, would love to. Would love to. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that everyone has their own sensory preferences to start with. So sensory processing really is that ability to take in what's happening in our environment. Our brain makes sense of that somehow based off its experiences and then generate a response to it. So choose whether it's relevant, choose whether it's not. What do I need to do about this? Is it safe? And do I?
And so in this particular situation where we're talking about kids with neurodivergence who often are more sensorily sensitive, where does it go from just being normal sensory processing to something that we want to actually get understood and addressed with sort of tools and techniques?
Yeah. Look, in my opinion, it's actually really important for all to understand our sensory individual differences and how to think about it. Because it is really important to know that actually only 30% of us would get all within typical scores on a profile.
Yep.
So I'm rather than thinking about, okay, this is a challenge that we need to support, I think it's actually just really important for any of us as individuals to know what are our processing patterns. You know, are we more hyper responsive? So are we more sensitive? But also, are we under responsive to what's happening around us? And I think the importance of noticing all of those things. And it's really that sensitivity is more easily seen and caregivers rather than under responsive. So I think anyone can benefit from a little more insight into what they're doing.
So in that, do we have a little exercise we might be able to do for those listening to consider what their sensory needs are? Because I think a really great way of understanding it is when you connect with your own sensory differences isn't the right word, but, you know, where you feel things in a hand or you don't feel it at all. And then it's a lot easier to put yourself in the shoes of your little person. Do you have something you might be able to run us through?
Absolutely. And you can actually find online questionnaires all over the shop that are free to do. And I don't think there's actually any common to I don't think there's any need to look for a specific one because it is a wonderful doing yourself. But I really like to think about everyday experiences. For instance, Carly, do you like to go to the same place over and over for food, or do you like to try all of the different places? And
Yeah, I'm all of the different places and all of the different things, which is really hard when you live in a small regional town.
yeah. What about kids?
So, it varies. So Mr. 8, same for everything all the time, as we'll talk about later. ASD makes total sense. And then Mr. 6, he chooses food locations actually based on social interactions. So he will just take whatever food is available as long as it's somewhere he might be able to make friends. And Miss 4 likes variety.
Yeah.
Mm.
Look at how all of those differences interact with each other. So, you love all of the different things. So you're more likely to be a seeker when it comes to your oral processing because you like to experience it. Whereas if you're someone who likes to have something the same pace, you're more likely to be responsive to things or sensitive, avoidant, but sameness feels safe, it's good, and it's comfortable for me, versus wanting variety and that's so I think it is a really nice way of looking at how that interacts with each other.
I love that because my husband, whenever we go out, in theory, he always wants to try something different on the menu that he hasn't tried before. And especially if we're at a bistro or a pub, he might make a suggestion of what he thinks he's going to get. And by the time he goes up to order, it will always be a chicken schnitzel with pepper sauce.
And look at that for safety. Absolutely. So right there within your family alone, you've got a combination of seeking, sensitivity, avoidance, and Mr. 6 who's in it for the social, potentially, don't know, but potentially more on the low registrations. Oh, I don't care. I don't need this.
Feed my extroversion, please. Yes, most definitely. Yeah, great. Okay. Because I think sometimes when you're talking about things to do with how the sensory impacts your world, it can be a really ethereal kind of theoretical concept. But being able to make it tactile makes it a lot easier, I think, for parents to understand how it can get in the way of the lives of our little people sometimes. So when do we look at it as being, rather than just an interaction, something that might be a conversation?
Yeah. And really that's around when it is actually having a functional. So if the child or an adult with sensory differences is finding it hard to be able to do what they want and need to be able to do, that's when let's try and put some accommodations and some strategies in place. And I think it is really important that, we are trying to support that person's individuality rather than trying to change that and trying to reduce it. So things like graded exposure to things can be really important so a person can tolerate really just me. We have to be really mindful that that person may be experiencing that type of input as genuinely painful. So we don't necessarily be willing to fix it, but really support it. And that's where it's needed.
And I guess with a lot of other things as well that can feed into the whole complexity of neurodivergence, this would be similar in that you can have, I suppose, a sensory cut, So those kinds of gradual exposures might work if the rest of your sensory cup is nice and calm. But if you're also wearing bathers where the scene is rubbing on you and the sound in the pool is overwhelming, then it's going to be a lot harder for those sort of things to be manageable.
100%. And that's where it's so important to know that sensory processing is so fluid and so dynamic and changing all through the day, just from day to day, changing from moment to moment. We've both got our little fidgets here where we're squeezing off. But if we've had a really stressful morning, a lot's been happening, general tolerance, now window tolerance is smaller. A sensory threshold is so it's important to keep in mind that some days something might be freezing and easy and lovely, and the next day we're finding it really painful.
One of the incredible common challenges for not only the person experiencing it, but for parents and carers, that we really love a guidebook that, sort of lays out everything that we need to do because we know that that's just generally going to make the day easier, but it doesn't work like that.
It really doesn't work like that. No. It doesn't. There's no recipe. And if only there was, right? It would make it so much. Most definitely, yes. And that's like in the balance of, working with families and navigating that day-to-day fluidity with them and helping them to understand that. And that there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the parents and carers out there who are listening, how would they identify moments of sensory overwhelm or sensory underwhelm?
So overwhelm, really, it is about being attuned to your child's signs, because some kids will really go inside themselves when they're overwhelmed. And, it's almost like that shutdown, we're not able to focus or we're not able to do what we need to be able to do. We go into ourselves and have like a little turtle in our shell. And then the kids who are really overwhelmed, we're going to be able to see. They're going to tell us for what it is they're saying, doing.
Yep.
Whether that's escaping. And kids will be regulators, so escaping the room is overwhelming to them. It's a good thing because they're tuned into what they need. Versus the child who's in the classroom or home. It's just so big and it's not coping, but I can't and I need to stay here and I need to keep doing this. Because eventually, so, it varies so much from child to child. But I think some really nice little signs that are very common is looking at changes in kids' eyes. Yep. I think is a big one. Looking at what are their eyes doing in terms of their movements, but also their expressions. Seeing kids. Complexion. I'm a really big one at looking at what kids' complexion is doing. Some kids will go really when they're really overwhelmed, or they'll go really flat. Again, there's no one size fits all. Yeah, these are the things to look out for. Is around looking at your child and knowing your expert of your child and knowing what it is that they're going to show you and tell you.
And I'm thinking about all of my kidlets. I've got all of mine are sensory, have sensory overwhelms and underwhelms. But I'm thinking about Mr. 8 and how he is both, that he, for some things, he will want to hide and shut it all away, and other things he wants to run away. And so you can actually, you can see that combination. Whereas Mr. 6, he's a runner. Like he wants to get as far away from it as possible. He well and truly needs some heavy work to work through it. You'll see when he's completely frustrated by something that he'll push a chair over, or he'll need to just do a big kick in the air. And yet I tend to find our youngest is actually the most attuned with some of her other much more subtle needs. So if things are too big and too busy, she goes straight to the freezer and gets an ice cube and sits and crunches on an ice cube. So
what a beautiful regulation strategy.
It's amazing. And it's actually great because then I know as well when she's overwhelmed that I can turn around and say, would you like an ice cube? Would you like some frozen blueberries? Can I have some frozen peas for lunchtime? And she's like, yes, but yeah, there is such that breadth of diversity in terms of their responses.
Yeah. And I think it is easier to look for signs of over-responsiveness compared to under-responsiveness. And I think we often miss under-responsiveness. Because the child is looking a little bit more daydream. Just a little bit sleepy or chilled. So slouching is a really good sign to look out for, that's a really good sign. Or when to put some things in place and give you more, give them so much easier to identify kids. Know they need more.
I'm going to say something probably honest that may be slightly controversial. And that is that quite possibly as well, as parents and carers, we might miss that a little bit on purpose because often we have very busy little ones. And so those moments where they are zoning out for a bit because they're feeling sensorily underwhelmed, they're like, oh, I can breathe for a minute. I might be able to go to the toilet and not have to actually worry about what's going to happen while I'm not here. So I think sometimes it's missing it because it's subtle and sometimes it's missing it because...
And yeah, I think keep in mind though, that is it underwhelmed or is that just well regulated?
Well, that's true too. That's very true too.
There's a difference, right, between being able to sit and relax and enjoy the movement because you're well regular and you're feeling like you need to move versus underwhelming. Like, I have no idea what is happening. And this whole is just something, no idea what you just said. You know, so that underwhelm is really important to, I guess, differentiate from just well modulated.
Yeah.
You know, and for parents not to feel judged if they're going to leave kids to be well modulated because, hey, that's awesome. Have a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get many.
Yeah. Enjoy a cup of tea at the table while everybody's sitting still. And there's a really important question there that's come up naturally through what we're talking about, and that is the concept of regulation. And the definition of what regulation is. I think it fits alongside, this sensory conversation very nicely. And there is a perception that regulated means calm. And I would just like to say that when you're talking about children, any child, if regulation is calm, then we're probably failing 90% of the time because kids, naturally, that's not their organic state. No. So boring. Yeah, I know. I don't actually want a constantly zen child. How do I have a conversation with a constantly zen child? Do you want to be constantly zen? I think I'd miss a lot. Yeah. So, yeah.
We wouldn't do what we need to get it done if we're constantly, oh my gosh, this concept of regulation is being on your understanding. So what are things you need to do in your own? So we need to be really to be able to just really, other than getting to sleep, we don't want huge long periods of down regulation. Regulation is where we have fun.
Yeah.
It's where we feel excitement. It's where we feel passion. So, it's very important to realize that it is just about matching to what you want and need. Because if you've got this big, let's say all of a sudden there's this huge bang in this room, we want to very quickly upregulate ourselves to keep ourselves safe. We're either going to run out of the room or we're going to get this upgrade and whatever it is. If we're calm,
yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, most definitely. And I think for parents listening who feel like the gold standard is meant to be to have a constantly calm child, I think it's really great for us to say that's not what we're looking for here. Yeah. We're just looking for a child that feels comfortable in the situation that they're in. So, at sports day, they're not meant to be calm.
Yeah.
They're meant to be jumping around with excitement.
Absolutely. And meant to be coming home a little bit frustrated. Because it's been a really big day. They've been regulated most of the day, and they've had to cope with all the colours, all the songs, all of the transitions between everything. You almost want them to something because that means they've been engaged.
Yeah, I mean, they've participated and taking it in. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, fantastic. So for swinging back to understanding whether or not we're looking at things where children may be struggling with their sensory processing, what are great ways for parents to understand, then advocate?
Yeah. Because of advocacy piece. So I think it is really important for families to be supported to understand their child's preferences. What it is they need, how to know, how other people can know what. So for a parent to be able to go, these are the signs that my child is needing more or my child is needing less. These are some of the things that can be supported from the child, in this situation or that situation. So even for swimming instructor to know, if you notice my child jumping around in the corner of the pool, that's actually a sign that they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed in this moment. And we'll come back when they're ready. Because if we can't explain the what to see, it's really hard for other people to understand what it is that's happening for your child in that particular moment, rather than, oh my gosh, they're so distracted jumping over in the corner, they're not listening to me, or they're shouldn't be in this swimming lesson. That's actually that child doing their best with what in that moment. So I think being able to advocate for what it is to see, what it is that you can do, so it's looks really important skill to develop, and it's hard. It is so hard to advocate for what your kids need, and I think it sets your child up for success, because if you're able to model that for your child, then you've this beautiful foundation and this beautiful connection relationship with your child to be able to develop this for themselves, for them to be able to have it.
And I think it brings us back to a topic that we see come up time and time again in our episodes, and that is the perception that when we see a child doing something, that it's due to bad behaviour. And being able to provide that insight, that education, that what we're seeing isn't bad behaviour. In fact, bad behaviour isn't really a thing. It's a nice big piece that we can continue to educate people around. But what they're doing is saying, I'm uncomfortable here and I can't express it in any way but by either moving my body or taking my body away from this space. And I'm actually trying to connect with you to let you know that I'm not okay. So would you recommend things possibly like writing a journal or a diary or note taking to help parents come to terms with maybe some of these things?
I love a good mention. I mean, because how hard is it when you get into a therapy appointment, pediatrician appointment, to remember all of the things that you're seeing, because it's so overwhelming. Often parents feel like there's this, power of a relationship. The therapist will be able to give them the answers, or the pediatrician will get given the answers. But as a therapist, we're actually relying on you guys. So I think keeping the little note in a phone, these are some things I noticed. And this is what I'm trying. This is what works. This is what sorry didn't want. Is really true. So really healthy.
Fantastic. Because I think when we're on the learning journey as parents about what is happening for our kids, it can be really hard to remember all those things. And to also, and I often say this, to remember to treat ourselves with kindness, because while we're trying to understand our children, we're trying to understand ourselves for the context of what's going on. But B, we're filling ourselves with so much knowledge that we're trying to draw on to be able to help our kids. And I love the advocacy piece for the parents. I think it's so important. There are a lot of spaces where parents can be, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, made to feel small about their concerns. And we do know our kids best. We see them in all of their moments. And therefore, we're in the best position to be able to say this is what's right for them, and to trust the gut.
Oh, so important.
Yeah, trusting the gut. So when do you think it's at a point where a parent should have the conversation about seeking some assistance?
I think if you've noticed those funny little things that seem to be happening and you go, why is this happening? Or, my child is finding this really challenging and I don't really know why. It's not super clear. Because I think as a parent, if you feel confident to go, this is something that's going to help my child, you try that thing, it works, your child's happy, you don't really need to be getting supported. But I think if you're feeling a bit stuck and you need someone to problems, that's what it's.
And when is it the difference between being slightly sensitive to sensory activities or inputs, and when does it become SPD?
Right. Oh, this is a biggie. Because if I'm totally honest, I'm actually not convinced sensory processing disorder exists. Yeah, it's not in our DSM. In Australia, it's not really recognised. And I would much prefer that all go out into the differences that we're trying.
Okay.
Because I think as soon as we start seeing it as a disorder, that's implying that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And there is nothing wrong with, as adults, we've got strategies that we use to support our own sensory.
Yeah. Like keeping Pulsar out of our house.
I do not wear woolen jumpers without a really soft layer underneath, because I'm just feeling irritable. We develop strategies as adults, so we need to give our kids opportunities to develop those stages as well and supported rather than seeing it as something that's right. That's something that needs to be treated and fixed and changed. But let's just understand it, be attuned to it.
And I think as well, when you're talking about things like supports, we need to also be in a place of knowing that there will be a lot of trial and error because there's no particular fix that works for all children and it doesn't always work all the time either. So I think with everything that we often have going on for our little people, the idea of going, God, okay, when they're like this, I can just use their weighted blanket and I'm going to know it's going to calm them down. It would be amazing if that was the case. But we need to also be aware that we may have to have 3 or 4 strategies on board for what would work in that particular moment. And that can make it really difficult. And I just want to bring us around to classroom. And there's often lots of conversations that we have that come up to elements of classrooms and school spaces and, daycare spaces. But when you are wanting to, talk to a teacher about how to support your child in what can be a very high sensory engaging space, obviously they love a list of this is exactly what we do. But as we've been saying, that's not really how it works. So for someone who I know has been involved with conversations with teachers at schools, what do you say to parents for approaching that conversation?
Look, I think it's really hard because as parents, we design our home. We've either got a home that has a lot of colour, has a lot of texture, has a lot going on, or we've got a home that has stark white walls. Maybe the odd bits.
And a green plant.
Yes. So we design our homes based on sensory processing. And teachers do too. So we need to become, really sensitive. And I think it is really hard for teachers because, they're often designing it based on their own feelings, their own thoughts on what needs to be visually presented and so forth. But as soon as you put stuff all over the walls, oh my gosh, it's really hard to choose what's on the wall. Because it's just... so there's a lot of pressure on teachers. So I think as families being really sensitive that that's the case, but also giving that tip, I guess, that says that my child actually does get really overwhelmed by a lot around them. Is there some way or is there some way that we can have opportunity to look a little bit serious? And teachers will respond really differently to that of what their ideas may be, what's going to be them in their classroom and how they want to support them.
And also being mindful that there might be 15, 18, 20 other kids with all kinds of different varying needs.
Absolutely. But traditional classrooms are designed for seekers. There's things everywhere. So I think it is really when you've got a child who is so responsive or is more sensitive and avoidant to then work how to support when they're just going.
Oh, those little brains.
Yeah.
And then, so something that I actually haven't done it because I think it's something that has happened organically for us in our house. But things like a home checklist of actually, which it's, different things work for different people in terms of how they can scan and work out what needs to be done. But what are your thoughts on doing a bit of a home checklist in terms of, items that might be overwhelming or underwhelming for a child?
I think it's important where you can to get your little person involved in that. Because I think are you thinking in terms of something that people refer to know that's overwhelming?
Yeah, and also to sort of, I should explain that better. So I've seen things that are called a home checklist where when you, for example, know that your child finds high levels of visual stimuli overwhelming, you can actually go through the rooms and look at what might be a bit too much, or to make sure that possibly, let's say, their bedroom is quite low from a sensory input standpoint. So when it is too much, they've got somewhere that they can go. Would you say that those kinds of tools can be beneficial and helpful when you're starting out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it is really important to keep in mind that you're going to want more spaces. less active spaces, because our needs are going to fluctuate through the day. So, whilst I think the bedroom's always a nice place to have as a lower stimulation space, and have some opportunity to retreat because it's a little safe space for food. I think it is really important to keep in mind that, you're going to want to have some nice active stuff for when that is where we're at on that particular day.
Yeah.
So that when with any one perfect setup, I think it is about having some options out there and having, whether it is a little checklist or what it is going to be as a family, for you to know, what are my go-tos that I'm going to go with? So for instance, friends, you've learned that that's exactly what she needs.
Yes.
But when you're first starting out, that's a lot harder. And particularly if we're not super well regulated ourselves, because we might get a little bit stressed about what's going on, our brains also need visuals as well as our cues. So I think that can be really to have some really quick, easy go-tos. Never grab this and just start doing it and see whether they can. And I think one of the other things is it's not necessarily that, but it's about the co-regulation in that moment when you're using that. Your relationship is key.
Yes.
The 6 hand tray, the digits, whatever it's going to be. So I think, being really mindful and
and I want to ask a brain science question, if that's okay. So because we are talking about neurodivergence and we're talking about all kinds of things that go on in our brains, are you able to give us a high-level explanation of why we sometimes see these sensory differences in each other and why it has such an impact on our regulation system?
Well, look, we all know that neural wiring happens from conception. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that if, your mother has experienced huge lot of noise, etc., or there has been any sort of stress, we're more likely to maybe be more sensitive when we're so it is wiring, it's changing from very there. But that's not necessarily the case. Just because our child is born sensitive and avoidant doesn't mean something of this. We all have those individual things that happen, and that wiring is pruning and changing, we're growing, and our kids also change. So, as our child grows up, at certain points in their developmental trajectory, their sensory processing are also going to change. And I think that's really important to keep in mind is that, we can flip all of a sudden. Some moments we're going to be really sensitive, and then we might have a huge developmental leap, and oh my gosh, that's all changed. And now I need this. And puberty seems to be a really big neurobiology is all shifting and changing. We've got hormones at play. All of us, needs it in.
Yes, because I wasn't scared about teenage years enough. And would you say that there's, I'm just trying to think of how to word the question, but when we're talking about things like running away, things like hiding, these are sounding to me like fight, flight, freeze. Is there a connection between our sensory receptors and those sensations of danger?
100%. And I think along the lines of that, it's important to keep in mind that every emotion is a wave of sensation as well. So, physical, that emotional, that sensory regulation is so that sensory sensitivity can then trigger that emotional response, triggers our stress response as well. It's all hunted, so you can't just be looking at sensory regulation because chances are the running away is this was really overwhelming to me. Now I feel scared and I have fear. But it just doesn't happen slowly. So, it's all so tied in. I guess that's where it's really important for your team to be working together. If you've got a therapy team, understand how to say for the child, because you can pull in all the sensory tools in the world, but it doesn't mean you've got a well-regulated child.
I think there are two main messages that I've been getting out of this conversation, and one of them is to know and observe your child, to understand them best. And the other one is that things can change. So be prepared to be fluid and to work with the situation that you're in, not necessarily what has worked before.
Let's try what works before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really hard. That is really hard as a parent. Because when you feel like you've got it figured out, all of a sudden you that's confusing and it's frustrating. And sensory processing is really confusing and it's really hard. Yeah.
Fabulous. So if you had one takeaway for our parents who are listening today, that you wanted them to know, understand, implement, what would it be?
I think a really big thing for me would be for parents to think about their own sensory patterns, because that is interacting with your child's sensory processing in every interaction and every meeting. So I think that's like easiest, because it's easier to have a think about yourself and then think about, well, how does that relate to my child? So what is similar? How can we connect on a sensory level? What do we enjoy at a sensory level? What is it for us that bounces against each other at a sensory level? So if my child loves noise and tugging and singing and tickling, and I'm really sensitive to noise and I find that really overwhelming, chances are I'm going to be bothered with that. The child's actually. So I think thinking about yourself, thinking about what it is for your child, and like, is this an issue for them or is this an issue for me?
And giving yourself permission to have sensory tools just as much as your child.
Yeah. If you say, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, I'm going to go put on my headphones. I'm going to just have a little drink of water or make a cup of tea while we do this puzzle or whatever it is. So that maybe in a space to do this. Yeah. You're modeling deregulation rather than going.
I'll be honest, that's me at dinner time. Although in full confession, my children have stolen every pair of flares that I've bought, so that's probably
They've narrowed your windows.
my window cloak and diminished my tools. Steph, thank you so much. I think this has been a really beautiful conversation and we've covered a lot, which is great. But I think we've well, that's a great time. We've dove into the complexities, I think, really, really well. And that's so important in this space to understand the variability and, that it's about seeing the patterns where you can, but rolling with things when they don't work out. Strength to all the parents out there, sensory stuff it's hard, but it's so incredibly important. So I really value your input. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, what a journey. That was the final episode of season 1. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, taking the time to learn more for the children in your life, and trusting me to share this journey with you. We'll be taking a 6-week break and we'll be back with more episodes just before school goes back on the 23rd of January. Please be sure to follow or subscribe to receive brand new episodes as they are released. And as we are a brand new podcast, I would greatly appreciate you leaving us a review on your favourite platform to help other parents find us, and to share this podcast with family, friends and educators in your child's world. I cannot wait to speak to you all in season 2. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check the show notes on our website for any links and references. You can find us at youcangrowyourownway.podbean.com. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love you to help us get the word out. You can share the podcast, tell a friend, and be sure to click the follow or subscribe button so you can access all our new episodes. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we would love to connect with you. You Can Grow Your Own Way recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this place, now known as Australia. We're coming to you from Jabberung, Jawajali and Wadawurrung country, the country of our guest speaker, and from wherever you are listening. We respect the elders of the past and present, and we share our friendship and kindness.